two pawns that are particularly vulnerable when you play the opening. And these two pawns are f2 and f7. Why? Because those two pawns at the beginning of the game are protected by the kings only. And therefore, when you play your opening, you have to pay particular attention to those two pawns. What do you think, Sun? Would this be a good way to start the game for white?
It'd be a horrible way to start because it blocks the good square for the knight and it doesn't help open this bishop at all.
So f3 would not be very good at all. In fact, if black plays a normal developing move, e5, takes some central squares and opens the diagonal for the bishop, that can even lead to the fastest possible game in chess if white plays this horrible move, g4. What is black's response going to be?
Black's response is queen h4, giving a checkmate to white.
Checkmate. So as you can see, it only takes two moves to checkmate your opponent if the opponent plays badly. f3 and g4 would critically weaken this diagonal, leading towards the king, making it very, very easy for the black queen to come to h4 and to deliver the checkmate. When you're only starting out, you're also likely to experience many cases when people want to checkmate you very, very quickly. They will play move e4, then move bishop c4, and then the queen out, attacking the square f7, again the pawn that is only protected by the king only, so this pawn will be attacked by the queen and the bishop, and on move 4 people will want to deliver the checkmate. So what would be a good way to stop the checkmate from happening if you're playing black? What do you do against e4?
I'd respond with e5.
And when the bishop goes out?
I'll develop my knight on f6.
That would be a very good way to continue, and by putting the knight on f6, you're stopping the queen from coming out. If the queen comes out, you can immediately take the queen. So that would be a really good way to stop that 4-move checkmate. What if white starts the game with queen to h5? What would be the best move for black to continue?
The best way to continue would be knight c6, protecting the e5 pawn.
Knight c6 will protect the e5 pawn. It also develops a piece. It also takes another central square under control. So knight c6 will be a very, very good way to continue. And now if white tries to deliver the 4-move checkmate by playing bishop to c4 and attacking this pawn, a good move, we already covered that in one of the previous videos, would be to play g6, which cuts off the line of attack. Now that would completely stop that 4-move checkmate from happening. There are a few other situations that you have to be very careful about. One of them is called the smothered checkmate. Now the smothered checkmate is delivered by the knight, and that's the situation when the king really has no escaping squares, and the game ends. One of the fastest smothered checkmates can happen after the introductory moves e4, c6, so-called Caro-Kann defense. So white takes up the center with e4, black responds with c6, intending to play d5 and put his own pawn into the middle. Now white develops a piece, goes knight to c3, black plays d5, white develops another piece, knight to f3. So the knights are now occupying very good squares, and black takes on e4, white takes on e4. The knight in the center is very, very good because it controls as many as 8 squares. d2, c3, c5, d6, f6, g5, g3, f2. 8 squares all around. It would be very, very good for black to chase this knight away. But how to do it? Well, one way to do it would be to play f5. Would this be a good way to chase the knight away?
No, it wouldn't be.
f5 would indeed chase the knight away, but it would create other problems for black. One of them would be the very weak square e5, which can no longer be controlled by the pawn, the square that the knight can use, and also this pawn would be blocking the bishop, and it will be weakening the king side as well. So knight e4, it's a good idea to chase it away, just not with f5. Black can play a move like knight f6 and offer the swap off of those two knights. But that would also mean that you end up with a double pawns. Are double pawns as good as the normal healthy pawns next to each other?
No, because you can only move one square with two pawns and it's blocking each other, and yeah.
Two double pawns are usually not as good as two pawns that are next to each other. Two pawns next to each other would have one possibility, two possibilities, three possibilities, four. There would be four possible moves for those two pawns to make. But if they're in front of each other like this, if they're doubled, you only have one possibility. So that means that their mobility is greatly reduced. Also, their ability to defend each other is reduced as well. In a situation like this, well, if one pawn is under attack, it can move forward and then the other pawn is protecting it. Or if this pawn is under attack and it moves forward, the other pawn will be protecting it. Not so with double pawns. So it's usually not a desirable situation to have double pawns at any stage, even though, as always, there are exceptions. We won't go into them now. But instead of playing knight to f6, black can play knight to d7, preparing this move, knight to f6. And then after the knights are swapped, the other knight will take its place. Because white can see what black is going to do. White's next move can be queen to e2. And then black completes his intention. He plays knight to f6. Good developing move. Would that be a good developing move?
It'll look good, but there is a deadly move next, and that deadly move is knight takes f6, giving a checkmate.
And that would be a deadly move, except that black will simply take back with his knight. And now black has completed his intention. But there is a truly deadly move in this position,
which is the other way around.
Which is the other way around, to deliver the checkmate by playing knight to d6. Well, the knight on d6 cannot be taken, even though the pawn is attacking it. It can't be taken. Why not?
Because the king will be open for a check.
Yes, well, this pawn is pinned against the king. The queen is pinning it, which means that the pawn cannot move to take the knight, because it would open up the file leading towards the king. And because this move is not possible, and the knight is attacking the king, and the king has no escaping squares, this is the so-called smothered checkmate, and white wins.